Okay. How we doing? Boy, that is great. I love when I just turn this thing on, everybody just quiets down. That's awesome. You guys are great. Who just took a test? That's it? Well, I wanted to thank everybody for being here, and I want to, as I'm introducing and talking about today, I wanted to make sure we actually express the main reason you're here. All right, we're not talking about just a story or bringing somebody in that is going to talk with you about, hoorah, let's be a doctor and try to, kind of tell you things are, peachy keen out there. What you're going to hear is a story about a partnership that developed because of a physician who cared, because of a patient who was in need of help. And as that partnership grew, as I've heard in the past, it was a life-changing event for both of these individuals. What's important about this is that it hits home here because the physician graduated from this school, and the patient was a world-famous athlete. And you're going to hear some of the stories related to this. Dr. Cruzy will be coming up in a couple seconds to talk a little bit more detail about these two individuals. But what I wanted to make sure that I relayed to you is that what you're about to hear is going to happen with every one of your patients. And for the 500 or so people that are watching this right now, each one of you is going to be responsible for a couple thousand patients in your practices. And so do that math about the number of lives you're going to be touching. And when you hear this story, understand that this is the life you're getting into, and that you will, without question, make a difference. One of the themes, and you've heard me say this before in the past, is this is not about memorizing facts. This is about taking those facts and applying them to the best possible patient care you can give to your patients. And you're about to hear a story about two people where this is more true than I've ever seen. I'm going to throw out a term right now called the Three Amigos. That'll be described in a little bit. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, thank you for being as old as me. And for those of you that don't know, thank you for paying attention because it's a pretty awesome story. You're also going to be hearing about the opportunities that many of us have dreamed about. And this individual is going to be talking about how he got there and the things that were important. All of this is part of the bigger picture and why a patient and a doctor had to get together. So with that, I'm going to ask Sean Cruzy to come up and talk a little bit. And then we'll be back in a couple of minutes with the program.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I have two individuals that I'm going to introduce you to. The first one is Vance Johnson, and Vance is going to do the majority of the talking for the first portion of our presentation before both he and Dr. Twardowski will share the stage. Vance Johnson is a former professional American football player who was selected by the Denver Broncos in the second round of the 1985 NFL Draft. He's a wide receiver from the University of Arizona. Vance played his entire NFL career for the Broncos from 1985 to 1995. Vance was a world-class long jumper. In 1982, Vance won the NCAA championship, as well as winning the gold medal at the Junior Pan American Games. In 1984, Vance just missing the cut for the U.S. Olympic team, finishing fourth in the long jump at the 1984 U.S. Olympic trials. Vance also assisted the Broncos to 3 Super Bowl appearances in the 1980s and had an impressive performance in Super Bowl 21. I got that right, XXI. That's recording 5 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown. Vance is joined by Dr. Mark Twardowski. Mark is an alum of KCU, graduating in 1988. After graduating from KCU, Dr. Twardowski went to Pontiac, Michigan for residency in internal medicine. And after that residency program, moved to Grand Junction, Colorado, where he's been an internist since then. You're going to hear a little bit about the relationship between these two gentlemen and how it came to be that they're here today to share part of their story. So would you please join me in welcoming Vance Johnson and Dr. Twardowski and his family to campus.
Am I on? All right. Good morning. How's everyone doing? I'm doing okay. I think I'm on the back end of a cold. Is there a doctor in the house? I need to get another opinion. No, my daughter plays volleyball, and I was with her a couple weeks ago. And over the last week, I was feeling down, and all of a sudden, I lost my voice. And right before I came here, I was on the speakerphone conference talking about this with Dr. Twardowski, and found out that I was actually going to be the one doing the presentation at the end of this thing too, and I was just hoping my voice would hold up. So last night was a little tough, but I made it through it, and it sounds like this morning, although rough, I'll be okay. I am a outreach spokesperson for Futures of Palm Beach. It's a drug and alcohol rehab inpatient facility out of Tequesta, Florida. And for them, I do a little bit of everything. I travel around the country speaking on their behalf, and as an advocate for recovery, I just talk to the entire country about the pitfalls of addiction, whether it's high schools or drug court graduations, whether it's yourself who are looking to be successful in life, whether it's athletes who are growing up to hopefully be a professional athlete one day. So it just really doesn't matter to me because it just crosses all ethnicities, barriers, financial, it doesn't matter. Addiction is destroying our country. In fact, I prayed about this when I prayed for you guys last night. And so, is everyone honest in here? So if you're honest, put your hand up. We're going to test this theory. And if you're not honest, keep your hand down. You probably shouldn't be in this class. Okay, we'll do it a different way. Everyone just put their hand up. This is what I do when I talk to kids, about 2,000 kids sitting inside of an auditorium. You two there in Joplin and also downstairs. Put your hand up. Okay, so now you're going to test out. Now you're going to test how honest you really are. If you know someone who's struggling with an addiction, who needs help, who is affecting your life, or you know they might need some help, if you know someone, keep your hand up, and if you don't, put your hand down. Thanks for being honest. I travel around the country, and like I said, I speak to sometimes, in some cases, over 2,000 kids in the auditorium, high school kids. And I'll ask the same question. And when I first start, you only see a couple hands going up, but I talk to them and I empower them and talk about the youth and how they're the future of our country. And they should really be honest and look around and see their friends who are raising their hands up. And slowly but surely, you'll start seeing more and more hands start going up in the air. And at the end of my talk, I have kids running down to me asking me what they can do to help their father or their mother or their cousin or brother, and sometimes, in some cases, themselves. Many have contemplated and thinking about suicide. So this is my journey. And Future has afforded me that opportunity by allowing me to go out, offer hope, and also to get people down into our, we call 5-star, except for the food, facility there in Tequesta, Florida. It's a 30-day inpatient facility. Anyone know where New Jersey is? I'm going to get real intimate here, guys, and I'm going to be really raw and really honest. And I think it's the only way I'm going to stay sober for the rest of my life. I am originally from Trenton, New Jersey. My father used to run the streets. He was a gangbanger. He was always chasing women. He was always using. He was also running numbers. Now, this guy was one of the last members in the community of his gang alive. And so he was told when he went to court that, young man, you're going to be probably dead one day because of the things that you're doing in your life. So we're going to give you some options. One, you're going to probably end up being one of the last ones alive and having to go to prison because of your affiliation. Two, you're going to join the service. Three, you'll probably end up dead. And we suggest you join the service. So my dad decided to join the service. He was stationed in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, out in Tucson. And after about 2 or 3 years, he was able to go off site and go out and have a good time, party a little bit, go back on, get some discipline in his life. And so he ended up going to a James Brown concert. Did any of you know who James Brown is? Okay. So he went to the James Brown concert, and he saw this young lady sitting inside of a car, And she's inside the car, so he taps on the window. Now, back then, guys, you couldn't just push a button to roll the window down. You had to go like this. So she rolls the window down. He says, hello, my name is Eugene. She says, my name's Gene. So here, Gene and Gina are talking. He says, hey, sweetie, so why aren't you in there at the party? She says, well, I'm only 15 years old, so my boyfriend's in there, but I can't go in. My dad's 21. Don't practice this one at home, guys. So he stands out there and talks to this young lady for about 2 or 3 hours. He gets her address, because back then they really didn't have phones, and he goes out to visit her. And she actually works out on a cotton gin yard, picking cotton for 16 cents a day in Marana, Arizona. After a few months, he ended up going to her high school gym. She's still a sophomore in high school. And he walks across the high school gym and gets on his knees and proposes to her. And she says, well, I'll marry you, but I have to ask my daddy. So they go back out to the cotton gin yard and ask my grandfather. And he says yes. And he dodges the draft, doesn't have to go to Vietnam. And they fly back out to New Jersey, where about a year and a half later, I was born. So here we are now in Trenton, New Jersey. That's how I came about being born in Trenton. Now my father, though, being out of the service, he starts running the streets again, starts chasing women, starts using drugs, and leaving this young lady, his wife, a little over 16 and a half years old now, home with this young little baby. The other thing my father starts doing is he starts putting his hand on my mom. After a while, my mother gets really sick of what's happening. She's young, she's scared, she's in an environment that she's not comfortable with. So she decides to take her son, myself, and move back out to Arizona. While in Arizona, my father wanted to be us in his life, and so he came back out to Tucson. He grabbed my mother and I and said, you're my wife, and I'm taking you and my son back to New Jersey. So we end up back in Trenton, New Jersey. My dad starts doing the same things. And he doesn't stop beating on my mom. He doesn't stop using drugs. He doesn't stop chasing women. He doesn't stop running the streets, and he doesn't stop beating on her. A year later, a little less than a year later, my sister is born. Now this young lady's here, really stuck. And she decides she's going to leave this guy for the last time. So she packs my sister and I up, and we head back out to Tucson. Told my dad, if you want to be in our life, you got to come back out to Tucson to be with us, because I can't be around that atmosphere and what you're doing to me, and I don't want the kids to grow up like that. So my dad decides to move to Tucson, Arizona. But the beatings don't stop. He's coming home late. He has lipstick on his collar. He smells of perfume. Sometimes my mother and I, we get in the car. I'm just a little guy. We pull up to bars at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd go inside the bar. He'd have a Kase hoochie. He'd have a hooch sitting on his lap. Another one's kissing him. It's a fight breaking out in the bar. My mom ends up getting beat up. We go home. I'm crying. Me and my sister are so upset. This is the dynamics I grew up around, guys. And it actually became my normal. As time went on, I'm a little older. My sister and I are sitting in the back seat of the car. My dad's yelling at my mom. And by the way, all my mom is this young lady who loves God. She's always on her knees praying and asking God to just bring healing to her family. And all I saw was a man coming home from partying, having a good time, living life large, drunk, high, smelling like weed, and beating on this innocent woman, literally. We'd be driving in the car. Like I said, my father would just reach over and slap the crap out of my mom. Blood would go all over the windshield. My sister and I in the back of the car crying like crazy. Also, back then, you go to the dollar store and you buy a bucket. Well, back then they had metal buckets. He'd come home about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning hungry, and he likes mashed potatoes. One night, the mashed potatoes were a little lumpy. So he is pissed off about the mashed potatoes being lumpy, and he takes his bucket and pours it over top of her head and punches the bucket. This is what my sister and I grew up around. My only escape? Sports. I created this reality in my head that I was going to be a pro football player, an Olympian, a great athlete, and a great star. I was going to not be anything that I saw growing up as a child. And so I would run. My only escape to get away from the pain and the anxieties and the stresses I saw at home was to run. I'd run so much that I'd come home and I'd pass out. I got really good at it. I won so many races. I never lost. I started having junior high school, elementary school coaches taking me under their wings. They knew there was something going on at home with this young man, and they couldn't tell what it was because if you're from the East Coast, you don't tell what's happening in your house. So they took me under their wing, and they helped me out in my sports career. One coach to another coach, even sometimes my teachers. I got so good that I started being recognized around the country as one of the up-and-coming great stars in track and field. And this reality that I created in my head started to come to fruition. It was real now. I was able to compete around the country, being sent all over sometimes the world to run. And I always won. Whether it was long jump, whether it was 100 meters, it didn't make a difference. I also played football. Now, I was really good at football because I was scared. And I ran so fast they couldn't tackle me. That's how I got good at football. Believe it or not, my father, who was this wife beater, this guy who partied, who worked hard, got up every morning. The house was so dysfunctional, but it was my normal, like I said. My escape was in my head and being who I wanted to be when I grew up. And I'm sure some of you can relate to that now, thinking about when you were younger, thinking this is what I want to do when I grow up. And in some cases, like me, if you're athletes, some of you, you might have been the hero in the home. So you start taking the attention off of the dynamics in the house onto yourself by being better. Some of you may be that A student, noticing when you get these A's, things are a little easier at home. There are different roles we play as kids growing up, guys. As time went on, I got so good at sports. Like you said, I had a chance to represent the United States of America down in South America and won the gold medal in the Junior Olympics. I went on to participate in the Olympic trials in Los Angeles and barely missed the Olympic team by about a quarter of an inch. And then I had a chance to get drafted. Can we go to that photo of me being a Bronco? I think that'll be on the presentation. So I get drafted in 1985. The newspapers say, let me back up. We got any Raiders fans in the house? Or is everyone Kansas City fans? By the way, this is for you Kansas City fans. When on draft day, I got a call. I'm sorry? Yeah, you can go right to the football pictures. On draft day, I ended up getting a phone call from the Los Angeles Raiders. Al Davis was in the background at the time, the owner of the Raiders. And he, in the background, said, oh, they asked him if he wants to be an LA Raider. And I was like, I would love to be a Raider. But then the Denver Broncos called another line. I had to take that call. And they said, we're going to trade in front of the LA Raiders and wanted to see if you would like to be a Denver Bronco. I didn't even answer the call back anymore for the Raiders because I wanted to be a Bronco. So on my way to Denver, when I was drafted, second pick in the second round, I started thinking about my life. I started thinking that I really made it. I'm on my way to the rest of my life now. I started thinking about my life as a child and all the things that I'd gone through, things that I witnessed, and the hard work I put in so that I could be away from that world. And this was my chance now to get completely away from it. The dynamics, the abuse, the chaos, the attempts of wanting to just die, thinking about suicide. Literally on that plane, I remembered being 15 years old and saying to myself, when I get old enough, I'm going to cut my penis off. Because I didn't like anything that I saw that a man did with his penis. It was abusive. It wasn't about what this covenant is supposed to be like that talks about in the Bible. I'm not here to preach to you. But it wasn't what I envisioned in life. When I landed in Denver, Colorado, the newspaper said, Broncos add Vance, the happiest day of my life. To this time in my life, guys, I had not drank alcohol, no drugs, no marijuana. Really wasn't into dating girls. When I did, I had a couple girlfriends in college, but I wasn't really big on anything that I saw growing up as a child. I had no tools at all to even be in a relationship. but I knew how to play football, and I knew how to run. And I was going to create a real world for myself, one void of all the chaos that I saw growing up in addiction. The first game of my career was against the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to take a drink of water. I got to kind of act this one out. Against the San Francisco 49ers in Candlestick Stadium. And all I had to do was stand on the 10-yard line and catch a punt. So I'm in Candlestick Stadium, right on the ocean there in San Francisco. The wind blows like crazy. So I'm standing there, and I'm watching the ball come to me, and I'm on the 10-yard line. So the ball is coming to me, and I notice it moving a little bit, so I run up. I run back again. I look down for the 10-yard line, and I put my hand up to catch the ball. The ball hits my hand, rolls in the end zone. San Francisco scores a touchdown and wins the ball game. And my teammates look at me like, your career is over with, dude. So I go to the sideline. I'm stressed out. I know I'm going to get cut. My career's over with. You get cut for anything when you first try out in the NFL. We fly home the very next morning. We're heading to practice to go over the film and be a part of the cuts. And I'm telling the guys, dude, I'm so stressed out right now. Should I tell my parents that I'm going to get cut? They said, no, dude, just wait. We're going to, let's just stop by the liquor store. They said, take a shot of tequila. It'll all go away. And I was like, I don't drink, guys. I don't get down like that. So they're like, no, you got to do this, man. It'll chill you out. I said, fine. So I did a shot of tequila, and I was like, whoa. You know that, right? I was like, this is the coolest thing. So you're telling me all I have to do is just take a shot of tequila, drink a beer, drink a little Hennessy, a little something just to knock down the nerves when I'm dealing with this stuff in life? This is all I have to do. I could do this. So during my early part of my career, I'd go out with my friends. We go to the strip clubs. I get drunk. I got brave, too. Then I had a chance to get introduced to some pills, all different types, didn't matter. They made you feel good, made you feel alive, mixed it with alcohol, made you feel brave. You could start talking to women. I go out one night, I meet this young lady at a bar, get her phone number, put it in my pocket. I ended up actually going to another bar, threw the phone number in the trash because I had wasted something. I woke up the next morning, realized I didn't have it, so I took my $150,000 Porsche back to the bar, jumped into the trash dumpster, and found that phone number. So I called this girl up, and we start dating. I start seeing her every once in a while. I'm a Denver Bronco, so she's excited about dating this football player. And we end up having sex. Maybe 3 or 4 times over about 2 or 3 month period. No harm in that, right, guys? I get a call one morning. She's in Houston, Texas. And she says, I'm pregnant. And I'm going to have an abortion. And I beg her, I say, please don't have an abortion. My family, we don't believe in killing babies. So please don't have an abortion. She says, well, you have to marry me. So I told her that I would catch a flight out there to marry her. So I'm sitting up on top of this wall outside of my apartment, and I'm drinking some tequila, a whole bottle this time, chop a couple Xanax. I end up falling off the wall, crawling into the bed, to my house, puked all over the floor. And you guys are DO, so you'll know this. It burned a hole. I don't know, I thought it was fire, but it burned a hole in the floor. I ended up going to the doctor the very next morning, and they said, man, you could have died of alcohol poisoning if you hadn't thrown up in your sleep. I ended up getting on the plane, flying out to pick her up in Houston. We took a flight then to Las Vegas and got married, like a drive-through McDonald's almost. $7 we got married. So we fly back to Colorado. We land, and I start going back to school, to work, play games. So I'm in the shower one day. Let's just get to the story. I'm in the shower one day. It's probably a few months later. We ended up having a little boy. And so one of the guys says, hey, dude, I heard you're dating our girl, Ange. And I was like, what? Another guy says, mind you, this is 60 guys in a shower. And these guys are screaming from on the other side of the shower, butt naked, about dating my now wife. And knowing her intimately. And telling me how she likes to do it. I was so pissed off. I dropped a couple pills, Started drinking on my way home. I was so angry when I ran upstairs. I was screaming and yelling. I knocked the television set off of the table. I punched a hole in the wall. I started throwing things around the room and screaming at her. I then ran up to her and told her she better effing tell me what happened. I pushed her across the bed, and she hit her head on the door of the closet, and I thought she was dead. I couldn't get her to wake up. So I picked her up, and I carried her into the bathroom, and I'm trying to dump water into her face, and she won't come to. I start putting water in her face out of the toilet, and she ends up waking up. And you know what? I was even more angry now that she was alive. I was screaming and yelling at her, told her I was going to effing kill her. Guys, who did I just become? Let me hear it. Who did I become? My father. But you know what? I didn't care. My mom didn't deserve to go through what she went through. I'm not like my father. My dad beat on an innocent woman. This girl cheated on me. And so I didn't care. So I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll do it way better. I'll start cheating with everybody. Teammates, their girls, I didn't care. I would start sleeping with anybody I want to sleep with. So I got a divorce. I brought the next girl over to the house. My wife's standing there holding my child in her arms. I'm high as hell, smoking weed, talking crap. I bring another girl to the door and say, I'm leaving you for her. I end up marrying that girl. We have a kid. That marriage doesn't work out. So I dump her. I'm cheating on another one, having another baby with this one. I go out and I'm having sex with a couple girls. One day, 3 girls. A couple of them got pregnant. Now I have 2 kids going to be born the same ages as the one that I had just born. This is my life. This is addiction. I thought I was a good guy, actually. I started having my exes drop kids off at the ball game. The kids would be running up and down the field. 85,000 fans before the game were screaming, oh, Vance Johnson's such a great daddy. Isn't he awesome? Look at his babies running up and down the field. Really? I paid my child support, so I thought I was a good dad. I also thought I was a great Christian. I went to church. I believed in Jesus. I was blessed. I threw some money in the pot. I would stand up at the front of the church, raise my hand, praising Jesus, making sure the pastor knew I was there, making sure the congregation knew I was there. I was a popular guy, and I was still doing everything I could to try to cope with life. I started drinking more. I started showing up to the ball games drunk, hoping like hell I'd be sober by halftime, taking a couple pills to get back up again, taking more pills so I can get away from the pain that I'm feeling in my legs and my arms and my shoulders, and ready to run again. I'm driving a motorcycle, 150 miles an hour. Get my Porsche, 140 miles an hour. I get pulled over on a Saturday afternoon. I'm high. The cop tells me, dude, I can't put you in jail, man. What am I supposed to tell my son? I put Vance Johnson in jail. You might make the winning touchdown tomorrow. We're playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I get away with that. I get ripped off from my agent. He steals about $1 million from me. So I drive out to San Francisco in my Porsche. I'm going down Highway 5, racing these Corvettes, going about 150, 160 miles an hour. Guys, we got pulled over by a freaking airplane. This airplane pulled up next to us. It was pointing at us to the side of the road. All these cops come up to us. One of the cops walks up to me and says, oh my gosh, Dan Reeves was my my college roommate. I can't take you to jail. So he escorts me to the border, back to Vegas, and I get away with that too. So I'm driving home, still mad at my agent. Nothing's my fault. I'm the one that got treated bad. I'm the one that grew up around shit when I was a kid. So I was just trying to cope through life and be famous and be successful. I was trying to be a good dad. I'm driving down I-70, going across the mountain. It's snowing like crazy. I'm going probably 90 miles an hour. The car starts spinning on the highway. I start hitting curbs. I'm high, and I'm laughing because I know I'm not going to die. I wish I would. This was my life during my career. We were right here in Kansas City playing against the Chiefs. One night, me and my friends go out. We're high before the game. We go to a strip club. This is the first time you guys are going to hear this story because nobody knows the story except for my teammates. But I'm going to share it with you since I'm in your hometown. We take some of these strippers back to the hotel. We're all getting high, sleeping with, I don't want to use a whole bunch of negative words in here. We're having sex. We end up getting busted. The very next morning, the owner of the team comes in there and says, I can't believe you guys are doing this to us. This never happened because I don't want your wives to find out. So it got swiped under the carpet. This is my lifestyle. 10 years in the NFL, 3 Super Bowls, one of the best of all time in the NFL, one of the best of all time, especially for the Denver Broncos. But I raised so much hell. I'm in the newspaper for all types of things, domestic violence. But I felt like I wasn't like my dad because these people who I was mean to deserved it. They bring the cameras over to my house. I'm in the garage beating on the car with golf clubs high, driving another car through the garage door, get another girl pregnant, go out to her house. I'm high out in front of the house, begging her not to have an abortion, to not kill my baby. Already have 5. Cop comes up, tells me to go home. My 3rd, 4th marriage, by the time I'm getting out of the NFL, my wife, when I told her, honey, I'm retiring, I go back home. It was a Saturday afternoon, and my stuff's at the front door. She says, I don't want to be with you. So I move up to northern Colorado. I go up there, I get married again. This is how that marriage happened. I'm out with some rich friends, bankers. It's about 12 of us inside of this restaurant. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm on a date, young lady I just barely met. We're high, smoke a little weed, drink a little wine, and they said, there's only 2 people at this table not married. I was like, they said, who's down for a wedding? I said, I am. This is my normal, guys. So he wakes his friend up, the banker friend of mine, who is a judge, at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we go over and have a wedding on the doorstep. He's in his pajamas. We get married. Wake up in the morning, sober. Oh, she's afraid to tell her parents. I'm afraid to tell my parents. So it lasts for a couple weeks, and then I bail out on her too. So you know what I do, right? How many am I up to now? 6. I decided that I'm going to change my life, move over to the western slope of Colorado, open up a mortgage company, buy a restaurant, start buying real estate, go to church more, become more of a believer, and slow down a little bit. Because I don't have a problem. I'm functional. I'm able to get up early in the morning and work hard, work late into the night. You guys might be able to relate with that if you're using or having a good time. Get up early, do your classwork, do work late, come to work school all day and do well. Surviving, coping. My oldest son decides he wants to move over to spend time with dad. Because now my kids are starting to come back in my life a little bit. Things have slowed down a little bit, but I'm still using. Married again. My son Vaughn comes over, spends time with me. And his grandfather just died of cancer. So he needed to head across the mountain to go see his mother. He went to go give his girlfriend a kiss goodnight. He's on his motorcycle. Because he couldn't reach me, I was chasing, probably having sex high in my restaurant, whether it be inside the freezer, in the kitchen on the floor, in the hallway on the floor, downstairs next to the dry goods. It didn't make a difference. I was with somebody doing something and using. My son, can you pull that photo up? He goes to give his girlfriend a kiss goodnight. He's driving back home on his motorcycle to go see his mom before he comes back over to go to college. He was going to college there on the western slope of Colorado. And Vaughn gets hit. And he gets killed. That was the love of my life. I got a call the very next morning. It was around 10:30 in the morning, and it was my ex-wife. I didn't even want to talk to her. I didn't know what had happened. And I took the call, and she said, "Our son is dead." And I dropped the phone, and I had a shot of Patron, and I put the shot away, and I drank 2 bottles right away. And I started walking around the restaurant, lost. So for the next 2 years, I drank, used, had sex with anybody. Even the father who had raised me was now working for me, was telling me, "You're a piece of crap. This is the son that I raised. This is how it ends up for you." I'm so mad at him. I pick him up. I carry him through the restaurant. I'm screaming and yelling at the guy. Tell him it's your fault that my life ended up like this because you're a piece of shit. And that's why I'm dead in my life. And then I pointed fingers at my mom and said, "It's your fault for being with that fucker." Because I didn't need to grow up around this when I was young. All the blame I'm putting on everyone else, and I'm here now, old enough to make decisions on my own. But still, in my addiction. 2 years later, guys, show that next photo of me. 2 years later, after all the using, I finally went to go see a doctor. They pushed a couple buttons, and they gave me some medication, but I wasn't taking it unless I was using it to get high. I ended up using myself until they induced a coma because I had passed out. They had made a phone call to my parents and said that we were on our way to the hospital in an ambulance. And my parents actually caught up to the ambulance. They rolled me in there, and for the next 26 days, I was like this. My sister came and took that picture of me because they said they didn't know how long after when I came back, because things were starting to shut down inside me, that I was going to live. When I woke up from that, I was chained to the bed. And I was chained because they said I kept trying to pull the tube out of my penis. I didn't know there was a bubble down at the end of it. I wanted it out. I was crapping all over myself. I know you've seen a 2-year-old poop on himself, but have you ever seen a 50-year-old crap all over himself? That's a lot of crap to take off of somebody. This is what my life ended up like because of using. I would look up into the sky and say, "Really, God? This is how my life's going to end?" This famous ball player? I remember watching these shadows in the morning, serious. These shadows would walk into the room, different height and sizes, no eyes, and like leaning over the bed. And they'd leave. And the next day they'd come again. And I'm sure my doctor friend would have a terminology for that, but they were real to me. And they weren't angels. When I got out of there, I thought if I just go back and work hard like I did when I was a child, that I can make up and things will be right again. So I actually stopped drinking for about 4 or 5 months. And then I got invited to a golf tournament. And I had a Mike's Hard Lemonade. That's it. And I was off to the races again. Now I get my 7th divorce. I'm living in my parents' house. I'm drinking vodka. I'm going crazy again. I start dating this other girl. One night I'm high, smoking weed. I decided to get some wine, get ready for her to come over. And I am wiping off this wine glass, had a long stem on it. And I ended up poking myself into the arm. And it stuck all the way to the bone. And when I pulled it out, compartment syndrome is what set in. So then I went to the hospital. Eventually, I was starting to nod off. So they took me in the back room in this chair. And now you get to hear the story about how a DO saved my life. How a DO saved my life. He's going to be able to share a little bit more of the story. But I can give you the highlights in my drunkenness and being high of what I remember. There was this guy that came in there, and then afterwards, because I was having so many issues internally, took me under his wing because I didn't have any insurance, I didn't have any money, and he damn sure wasn't a Broncos fan. But he was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But he wanted to help me out. And so he would put his hands on me, and he would talk to me about my childhood. He would talk to me about addiction in my family. He would talk to me about a mother who was pretty domineering because of the crap that she had gone through. He talked to me about so many different things that nobody would talk to me about. Everyone always wanted to talk about football. This man wanted to talk about me, the person. Relationships. That's not a doctor. Doctors go click, 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 click. Here's some opioids. This guy wouldn't even give me any drugs. He gave me medication for my high blood pressure. He treated the person. He knew what I didn't need. So for the next 5 years, he did so many different things for me. Sometimes I would make up something just so I could be in this room with him again. He did a colonoscopy, I think, when they go up to the right up there. And then another one where he went down here. I would have pancreatitis sometimes, and he'd come and he'd make sure that I was taken care of the last time. I had already had it 3 or 4 times prior to that. So literally, I'm just trying to kill myself, guys. But this man, for the next 5 years, and because this God that my mother was on her knees praying to, who I think is real, had grace on me, he was used to keep me alive long enough until somehow, prayerfully, I didn't die before my time. Eventually, I was driving through the Grand Canyon one time. Not Grand Canyon, through the canyon there where we lived at. And I'm screaming out to God, man, God needs some help. My 7th ex-wife had reached out to the NFL and said, this guy's killing himself. I ended up getting a call from a facility in Florida who offered to get me out there. The NFL would pay for it. So I went and got treatment there. They paid for 28 days. And when I first got there, I was around a whole bunch of crackheads, alcoholics, and drug addicts. I'm a pro football player. I don't want to be out here. I'm not like them. So I'm walking around outside the gate, not wanting to be a part of the community. And I heard the voice again tell me, Vance, you have to get help because you're sick. And that wasn't my voice. And when I went back in there, I started to listen to the stories of people like yourselves. People don't want to be drug addicts and alcoholics and dying. I started hearing the underlying issues, the things that they were dealing with as children, how things started to creep back on them, how some of them actually wanted to be DOs. But when they flunked out, they went to the bottle. Or they went to the pills. So what happens to you? Because most of us are living our lives on social media. That's an addiction. You're creating this persona and this personality that everyone thinks is all amazing, but yet you go home and you're sad and you're lonely. What happens if you're an athlete and you get hurt and you can't reach your dreams anymore? It's just another generation, guys. But addiction's out there and it's waiting for you. After 28 days, I flew back home. And I realized when I got home that there is no way I can be around people, places, and things to stay clean. It had been a while since I saw Dr. Twardowski. I had moved back out to Florida. They offered me a job where I worked at to be a ball boy. This former millionaire was offered a job to be a ball boy. And I took it to make over about $240 a week in a bus pass in an apartment down in the alley. The Friday before the Monday that I was supposed to leave to work, the Denver Broncos called me and said, listen, Vance, we hear you're doing good. We can't pay you much, but we'll give you $2,000 a week just to be you. Wear the Super Bowl rings, go hang out around Bronco fans, party, have a good time. $2,000 a week, $200 a week. Come on. The devil's a subtle. I called my mom. She says, I'm not worried. God's going to lead you the right way. I ended up catching the airplane back out to Florida. Got my bus pass. And I started to be around the people who were in recovery. And I started to see the bigger purpose of what God had planned for me in my life. I started seeing the reason why I had all those accolades, and I went to all those Super Bowls, and I had a mighty fall because it was my journey to go out and offer hope. So in this journey, I moved to northern New Jersey, the Northeast rather, and I get a call from general counsel for osteopathy. And they called me in the office, and the director's there, and they're talking to me about the speaking engagement to a bunch of DOs, 500, the DOs community up there. So this is interesting. So I'm sitting here. I don't even have a clue what a DO is, right? I said, can you explain what a DO is, please? Because I don't mind talking about addiction and recovery and my journey and everything, but I need to know who I'm talking to so I can kind of relate a little bit. And so the director, the executive director, starts to explain. And I was like, wait a second, what? And I grabbed my phone, and I pulled up, and I started to type in Dr. Mark Twardowski. And on the end of it, it said DO. And I was like, oh, I dropped the phone, and I just started crying. And I was like, that guy saved my life. I said, we call him? Remember? I was like, can we call that guy? And I was like, hey, Dr. Twardowski, it's Vance. I don't even know if he knew I was alive. So then I got invited to speak at another large, and this is how I knew that this was the whole plan that God had for me, guys. Was so that I can end up here today to talk to you and encourage you, not just to be aware of these pitfalls of addiction in your own lives, but make a decision what you're going to do and what you're going to be and why you're in this field. There are lives out there for you to save. There's a connection. And who's that Vance Johnson that you're going to save? You guys are the next generation. You guys are going to be the ones bringing change here. You guys are the ones that is going to be sitting there with someone for 5 years who's struggling in addiction that they're going to trust because they come to you when they have pain. And you can tell them what they need to do. That's the reason why I'm here. That's my journey. And I travel all over the country doing the same thing in drug courts with rich people. I fly to Canada. I was flying in this guy's helicopter, making $2,300 a day to try to keep him sober. To his houses all over the place. Multi-millionaire. Multi-millionaire. It doesn't matter. Addiction's taking everybody out. Going down the streets of Trenton, New Jersey. Almost getting killed by crackheads because I'm trying to pull another crackhead out of there. Because this is what I do. We've got a little bit more to go here, guys, so I better, it goes on forever. But let me share one more story with you. My son, who died, can you put up the place I work at now, just futures information? Oh, thank you. My son, who died, I was high when he died, and I couldn't find him out at the cemetery. I was out there with my family. I'm remarried, by the way. I'm remarried. But this time I'm married, I'm clean, I'm in my right mind, I know who I am, and I know what covenant is. And I'll never cheat on my wife. I adopted her children, and they have a father. And the week my son was killed was the week her son was born. His name is Taj. He's 9 years old now. Love of my life. Me and Taj were out at the graveyard looking for my son's gravesite because I wanted to show him who would have been his stepbrother. Gravesite. And we couldn't find the grave. We were walking around. There was thousands of grave sites out there. So we got in the car and we're leaving, and my wife says, honey, why don't you just ask the gravedigger? And first I was a little disappointed, but I felt like if I was going to find my son, it's the only thing I could do. So I said, sir, when we pulled over, can you tell me where? He's like, oh, my God, you're Vance Johnson. I was like, yeah, man, can you tell me where my son is at? And he says, yeah, radio in Vaughn, Edward Johnson. And I could hear over the radio, they came back. He's in plot 3, row 13. All these thousands and thousands of grave sites, guys. Plot 3, row 13. My birthday. I went out there and laid across that grave, and I promised him, frozen in the ground in Colorado, that I would go save another son. I promised him. And that's the other reason why I'm here, to tell you sons, I don't know what type of father you have, but I will tell you this. I'm sorry I didn't raise you to be the man that had your priorities put together, that you put God first, that you didn't go take advantage of women just so you can have sex and lie to them and tell them you love them. That your career and your family was important, not just to be manipulative and destroy people's lives. And to my daughters, you ladies here, don't go give your body and your virginity up for somebody just because they say they love you. You can only have that one time. And if you already have, it's time to stop. You want to save that sacred thing for someone that's special. To my daughters, you just having sex with someone just because you care about them? You really need to evaluate who you are. That's not how I raised you to be. Be more of yourself than that. Because it's going to lead to something in the future. That's my story, guys. Thank you so much for letting me share. I'm going to invite Dr. Twardowski up so that he can share some of his story, because he knows everything. I was high, so he'll know a lot more about what it was to take care of this dying soul who was literally trying to kill himself slowly. And then we'll kind of go back into more of the program. I love you, man. I love that guy.
You guys might have figured out that over the years, Vance was my patient, but much more important, Vance is my friend. And what I would tell you, and what I tell my medical students, and I'm not going to talk for a very long time because Vance's story is compelling, way more than what I can say. But remember this little bit. Your job is to become a physician, not a technician. Okay? And we do lots of cool stuff to people. I did lots of cool stuff to Vance. Do scopes and all sorts of ICU stuff. But really, I can take anybody and train them to do the stuff to people that we do. I can take anybody here and teach you how to do a colonoscopy. I can take anybody here and teach you how to do an EGD or put an art line in or put a swan in, all that stuff. That's the technician part of being a doctor. That's not the important part. The physician part of being a doctor is the ability to look at somebody and see the inner strength, to see the person who's there, to get to know who it is, to, get to be a friend with your patient, to know what makes them tick, to learn how to deal with their spirit, their soul, their body as one being. That's what being an osteopathic physician is about. You have a professor here, Kevin Hubbard, who writes a lot about those sorts of things. The truth, the encompassing nature of being an osteopathic internist. But I think it applies to all osteopathic physicians, that you can't just treat a symptom. You can't just treat a small part of your patient. You have an individual who has motivations and who has loves and who has fears. And you can't treat Vance's blood pressure, which when I met him, and I'll tell briefly the story, when Vance had his injury, which eventually brought us together, he pierced his arm with a wine glass stem. My friend, the orthopedic surgeon, had taken him to surgery because it was a surgical emergency, and I suspect somewhere along the line you're going to get a test question on this. The compartment syndrome, the key components of a compartment syndrome. But long story short, Vance had a pale arm and he was going to lose his finger, so he had to be emergently taken to surgery. So an hour after surgery, Dr. Kanakadofel called me and said, okay, I got this guy's arm saved, but we got a problem with his blood pressure, and Vance's blood pressure was about 260 over 140. So needless to say, the surgeon spent an hour with him, and I spent the entire night with him in the ICU. got to know him a little bit over that night. And this is back in the old days when the internists were still the hospitalists, and we just started having a daytime hospitalist on. And after spending 10, 12 hours with Vance and talking to him and adjusting things and whatever appropriate therapy we did, and knowing that Vance had no insurance and no money and no physician, I asked Vance if he wanted me to continue to follow him along through his hospitalization and then follow up with me as an outpatient so we could start to deal with some of the medical issues. And he was thankful. He said yes, please do, because I was afraid that the system would have allowed for the daytime hospitalist to take over, and then eventually he'd be discharged and would have no care. So I think it ended up being a good decision, but over the next 5 years, I worked with Vance, and we worked on his blood pressure and worked with all his other issues, and kept encouraging him to get help and working with him and whichever of the women in his life happened to be around at the time, and trying to reach out to the NFL and get him help. I'm not a hero. I'm just a doctor, okay? I'm just a doctor who cares about my patients, and I always say that you should treat everybody who comes into your office as if they're part of your family, because they're part of somebody's family, right? Somebody cares about them. And at this point, Vance has really become part of our family. And I do love him like a brother. We've shared a lot, and he's been important to us, and I think that you've heard that we've been important to him. My wife, who's a nurse practitioner, is also taking care of Vance and helped him through some rough times. So my word to you is, be a physician, not a technician. The stuff you can do to people is not near as important as the stuff you can do for people. Okay.
So let's. I need to get a little business in so that my company knows that I was here to work too, and not just share my story. But I work for Futures of Palm Beach out of Tequesta, Florida. I mentioned that, and I wanted to go through a couple things. Can you help me with the PowerPoint about our company? Which the story of this company is just absolutely amazing. This is the parent company is called GMH, and they're a $3 billion company who had issues in the past with friends, family members who struggled in addiction, and they decided to open up their own facility because they didn't like what they saw around the country, and they wanted to have the best staff, almost like, I wouldn't say the Patriots, because I knew that the Philadelphia Eagles were going to win. But they wanted to have a great organization with the best physicians, the best therapists in the country to offer a quality service. And we don't look at treatment as a way to go be sober for a lifetime. 28 days is not enough to go get sober and think you're going to leave and be sober for the rest of your life. We coin in, we don't coin out. If any of you have any loved ones who have gone to treatment and have failed and gone back over and over again, it's because just because you go to treatment doesn't mean you're cured. It's a lifetime journey. And so what I thought I'd do, I used to be real pumped up too, by the way, up there. Can I go to I want to go to the DBT and then also, all right, let's start right there. All right, yeah, now I'll advance it. Okay, let's see where that goes to. So I was talking about this 30-day residential treatment facility, and out of the 4 weeks, out of the 4 weeks that you're going to be there, the first obviously is the detox. And I can tell you as a former patient in a facility, detox is pretty rough. And I think you detoxed me a couple times too there, doctor. But after that period of time, there's a blackout period where you don't have any access to phones, can't call anyone, just concentrate on being healthy so you can be clear-minded. Week 2 and week 3, you're doing your individual therapy, looking at self-perception, spirituality, if anybody comes in as believers. Our facility is not a Christian base, although I'm a Christian, and I believe to me that's my sobriety, and to me ultimately sobriety forever, but there are different ways to find sobriety. I don't care if you're a non-believer, if you're a Buddhist, it doesn't make a difference. If you have a plan, you can stay sober for a lifetime. Talking about grief and loss, family dynamics, skill-based counseling. We have great therapists at our facility. Then we have group therapy. We have DBT, and I'm going to show a clip here on our DBT and what that's about. Excuse me. Then we go over the medication and education piece. And the thing we want to do too is, for instance, just because I go get treatment doesn't mean I'm not supposed to go back to my doctor so I can do maintenance on whatever is going on in my life. So when you have people that have left treatment or going to treatment, make sure you stay connected with them because you're a large part of their journey when they get back home and getting out of treatment. A very large part because they trust you. Then the experiential therapy with nutrition, art therapy, yoga, hypnotherapy, and outdoor activities. I was an artist when I was young, and my addiction took away my art. I worked out and trained. I was an athlete when I was young and most of my life. The addiction took all that away. So there was really nothing that I had left by the time I went into treatment. And then we're going to go to, we can play this here, understanding dialectical, can anybody else enunciate that? Dialectical behavioral therapy. DBT is what I call it. This is our director here. Explain.
The core basis of DBT is mindfulness. It's being aware, being present in today. Many times, and I call them time travelers. Many people that come in here, they're the time travelers. They're living in the past or they're so worried about the future and they have such anxiety about those issues, they're not present and they use their substances to help alleviate that. Research has shown that most people with anxiety, what they have anxiety about is having anxiety. So we show them that there's no logic in that thinking. Another part is that DBT, it helps them with distress tolerance. And distress tolerance helps people to deal with what they're faced with, be it a crisis or just the reality around them. And there's techniques within the DBT that helps them realize that. And then another portion is interpersonal effectiveness. What kind of relationships do you have? Are they healthy relationships? Are they relationships you want to broaden and build upon? Or are they bad relationships? And do you have to get rid of the bridge that ties you to those folks?
That one started again, right? We're good? Okay, so that's, wow. That's my presentation, guys. I sure really greatly appreciate all of your staying connected with me, listening to my story. I hope you're not judging me too much. There was a lot, I'm sure, to absorb, and we're going to open this thing up to for questions for myself and my DL brother.
All right, so we're going to go to some of our off-site locations for questions first. So if there's questions in Joplin, we'll take a couple questions in Joplin, and then we'll move over to AC 100, and then we'll do in the room questions here, okay?
We don't have any questions down in Joplin, Dr. Cruzy.
All right, thanks, Dr.
Okay.
Dr. Kendi, thank you.
Okay.
Dr. McGowan and AC 100, any questions down there?
What are the Three Amigos?
All right, someone asked. Here we go. Three Amigos. So have you guys heard of the movie The Three Amigos? Yeah? All right, back in the 80s, myself, Mark Jackson, and Ricky Natil, we were three receivers for the Denver Broncos. And when Ricky got drafted, Mark and I at that time were best friends and roommates. And we shared everything, even girls back then. But so I got so many stories. So Mark and I, when Ricky came, I didn't want Mark to like Ricky. You guys know this one. I didn't want Mark to like Ricky. So I started being mad at Mark. So then Mark got mad at me and started being friends with Ricky. And so after a few weeks, I thought, this is not working. We have one quarterback, one football, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm going to figure out how to make some money out of this thing. So I came inside the room one day, and I said, hey, Mark, I got a great idea. You know that Three Amigos thing with Martin Short, Martin Lawrence, and Chevy Chase? He said, yeah, why? I said, I got a great idea. Why don't me, you, and Ricky call ourselves the Three Amigos? He was like, get the fuck out of my room. Nobody's gonna fall for three. Can I cuss in here? No one's gonna fall. No one's gonna fall for three niggas being no day three amigos. So, guys, I'm sorry. I gotta be transparent. So I want to stay sober. I don't want to relapse. So I said, no, I promise it's gonna work. So I go outside to practice, and after practice, we have the media come up. Oh my God, you're recording that too. Cut, bleep. And so I told the media, I said, John Elway called us the Three Amigos. So we're gonna be Three Amigos. We got a quarterback, and it's gonna be awesome. We're gonna be friends. And they were like, oh, awesome. So they go ask John, hey, John, we understand you're calling Mark and Ricky and Vance the Three Amigos. He said, what? He said, maybe the three midgets. They're all under 6 feet tall. But the media loved it. And so it took off. It took off. And it forced myself and Ricky, Mark and Ricky, to travel around the state. And we did posters. We sold 150,000 posters in one night. So we ended up doing another set. It got on coffee cups. We started doing Taco Bell commercials all over the country. And we started making all this money. I was like, yeah, right? So then we went to the Super Bowl. And our agent, who represented us, who collected all the money, when we came back from losing against the Washington Redskins, took all the money and left. But the best part about that was the Amigos kept riding. So, in fact, we did just a few years ago. I was drunk with, I think, my 7th ex-wife. I did a Taco Bell commercial with Mark and Ricky, but we're still really good friends. So that's how the Three Amigos came about. Yeah, good question.
We've got a couple down here.
All right, go for it.
Hi, Vance. This is Emma Ide. I'm a first-year student.
Hi, Emma.
And I was wondering, I was wondering if you had any advice for people who might be in an abusive relationship, and what advice, or how should they handle that? What should they do?
Wow, transparent. What a great question. Thank you so much. So I'll talk to that person like it's a brother of mine, or like it's a sister of mine, or like it's a daughter of mine. The first thing you got to do is admit that you're being abused, and you got to come talk to me about it. And when you come talk to me about it, we got to talk about options. And the one option is this, the only option, is you can't stay in the relationship, because it's not love. Because when someone loves you, they actually offer themselves up for you, because love does not seek itself. Love does not need you to make them feel good so they can feel like they can treat you good. Because once that person changes their mind about you, you become shipwrecked. And then everything that you based your life off of was how they felt about you. And oftentimes that causes someone to eventually start using so they can cope. And then you got to think about it, whether you're a guy or a girl, if you want your child to be in that situation. And they'll end up like Vance Johnson in a coma and probably dying one day. But you have to get out of that relationship. And don't think just because you can love that person that you're going to love them out of it. It's not going to happen. You have to leave the relationship. And I don't care how you get out of the relationship. And I'm just being honest, you have to do it. Or call me and I'll go kick. Get out of the relationship. Don't stay in an abusive relationship. They learned it from somewhere, they grew up around it. And it doesn't just change overnight. So I hope that answers the question.
We have a question down in Joplin.
All right, go for it.
Hey, just had a quick question. I'm curious if you could elaborate, and I'm not sure how well you remember either, but if you can, it'd be nice. Elaborate a little bit on the specific moment that you found your interaction with the DO was unique, or going into more depth, or I don't know exactly how to ask this, but the moment that you felt like the DO was reaching a different level of connection than the other connections you've had with other doctors in the past.
That's easy to answer. I was, when I started seeing Dr. Twardowski, this is the truth, I didn't even think he was a doctor. Because the stuff he was doing, doctors don't do. Every doctor I've ever seen since I was in the NFL, you'd walk inside the room, you would sit down, somebody would come in and take your temperature. The doctor would come in with his clip, with his computer, And he would ask you questions, click, 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 click. And he would write a prescription, and then you would leave. And I could get my drugs. And I could manipulate the situation any way I could to get what I needed. And when I went in with this man here, he pulled up a chair and he sat down and started talking to me about Vance, about my life, about my parents, about my father, about my mother, about what it was like being young. Not one time did he talk about sports. He talked about me training and being an athlete. He wanted to know the person. He wanted to know about my relationships now. Doctors don't ask that question. They don't care who I'm screwing. Right? They don't care. DOs, you guys are different. And I'm sure you've done your history, and I hope I'm right, but like this was founded on something special a long time ago, right? That's the reason why you're set apart. There's not many of you out there, which is probably a good thing. There's a specific reason why you are in this field. There's a reason why you want to be a DO. And I think Dr. Twardowski kind of answered that question when he was up here, and I'll ask him to expound a little bit on that. Which, by the way, his daughter's here, and I just want to thank her, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here either, because she's the one that set this whole thing up. So thank you, Nicole. Here you go.
Yeah, I just get back to what we talked about before, is that your job is to manage a whole human being. I mean, the osteopathic principles are that we're managing not just somebody's heart, or not just somebody's blood pressure, but their whole being. And how can you manage a whole being if you don't talk to them? You got to do that. You got to get to know who you're dealing with. And I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't do that stuff, but I do talk to people. And when you talk to people, and you don't have to spend hours doing this, you can talk, ask a few important questions, draw out if there's something that's bothering them, something that's affecting them, something that's making it so this guy who is a multimillionaire doesn't take his amlodipine because he can't afford the $4 at Safeway. How do you know the answer to the question about why your drugs aren't working if you don't talk to him? So literally when we wrote for the $4 amlodipine and his blood pressure was still 220 over 110 the next time he came to the office, I had to ask him, Vance, did you not pick up your medicines? And so then we had to figure out ways to get him free medicines. I mean, that's a long way to fall. But the other thing that I thought was interesting about dealing with Vance, and it's not because he's famous. I mean, I'm a Steelers fan. He's we used to hate to see him come to town, but but the amount of training that it takes to be a professional athlete or nearly an Olympian, that takes a lot. That takes a tremendous inner person to do that. So when you look at him in the eyes and when the fog clears, you know that in his soul there's tremendous power. It's clouded by alcohol and drugs and bad relationships. I remember one time I told him, dude, you just got to quit marrying people.
Yep. Doctors don't say that.
But there's a tremendous inner power that you would never get to if you weren't willing to spend a few minutes talking to him. So, you got to know the patient.
And honestly, I didn't know what a DO was until after I was sitting in that office there in New Jersey. And I ended up grabbing my phone after all these years and pulling up his name and seeing those beautiful letters next to it. That's when I found out.
All right, we've got a question up here in AC 200.
Hi, Dr. Twardowski. My name is Amanda Hirsch. I'm one of the full-time faculty members here, internal medicine by training, and I have the incredible fortune to be an educator. But one of the things that I noticed in practice was that there's a lot of stigmatizing language that is carried through in regards to individuals that have mental health issues as well as substance abuse issues. And one of the things that I noticed was that when language such as just a drunk or seeker are oftentimes placed into SOAP notes or progress notes, that the quality of care for that individual diminishes depending on the provider. And I'm curious what inspiration you can give us to today to where we can start making that change and help other individuals realize that this is a human being that didn't want to wake up this way, and we can give them the best care we can.
That's a real trap. Because I would love to be able to claim to you that I am never using those words in my notes. What I would say is that I may well say to myself before I walk in the room, daggone it, they're coming to ask for more Percocet. Because they do, and there are those people out there who that's their job. I mean, that's what they do for function. They try to convince a doctor to write Percocet and then go sell them on the street. But then when I get in the room, I am still with one person. I'm still trying to sort out what's making that person tick. I'm still trying to figure out if their pain is real, sort out whether they have a pain issue or an addiction issue. And I'm not an addictionologist. That's not what I do. But I still think if you get to the root of it, if you get down to the fact that once you walk through that sacred threshold into the room with one person, and you spend your time trying to sort out what makes that one person tick, and doing it in a 15-minute office visit is not always easy, but you sort out your time dealing with the person who's in front of you, then some of that other stuff falls away. And honestly, the words that are in the chart that says this person is a drug seeker, I don't necessarily see that as an impediment. I think that if I see that in the chart several times, that boy, this patient's displaying drug-seeking behaviors, that doesn't mean I don't think that they're a real person. That just means that I'm recognizing a bad trend or a problem trend, which may mean I have to dig a little further. I mean, Vance came in dozens of times over 5 years and said, I bet I could do better with some Seroquel, or I bet I could do better with some Xanax, or, and he may have been displaying seeking behavior, but I still spent my time trying to sort out who he was. So I recognize the pitfall you're describing, but sometimes I can use that as a flag in my own notes.
I just really want to thank you for that response. It's absolutely wonderful. And thank you for the lives that you touch on a daily basis.
Okay, do we have a question in AC 100?
Yeah. For both of you, what are some ways you think you can help prevent people from getting into addictive behaviors, specifically maybe some youth and things like that?
Go first? Sure. Throw me under the bus. I'll tell you, I think recognizing the pitfalls of what sets people up for those behaviors is probably as much an issue as anything. Like Vance says, and if you look at Vance's life, he never drank at all, never used any drugs at all until one bad incident, and all of a sudden he saw a significant life change potential. I mean, you're in a preseason football game and you fumble the punt that is going to be the make or break. I mean, he's going to be the punt returner as a rookie wide receiver. He's going to be the punt returner, and he just biffs that, and there's a huge major life change. Imagine how much different his life might have been had one of his friends or the team doc or the team trainer said, "Don't worry about it. Stuff happens. The coaches know that stuff happens. You're going to be okay. You've caught 1,000 punts in practice." Imagine had the interaction been with the people who are closest to him, a positive interaction instead of a negative interaction. So, yeah, if one of your buddies bombs the anatomy lab test because the professor put the pin a little too close to the next structure over, and we always knew they did that. And they're sure that they're never going to be a doctor because they bombed that test. And you say, let's go out and just get drunk and forget about it, versus let's go out and have dinner and talk about it, and then go have a movie and see if we can't blow off some steam in a positive way. So I think that the next interaction after a trauma, the next interaction after something bad happens, is where the intervention can lie. So.
You see that kid with number 20 on? You see him? You tell him how much you love him as a father, how important he is, and how it doesn't make a difference what he does in his life when he grows up, how he's going to be valued, and how you're going to stand by his side no matter what it is in life that happens. And you prepare him for all the pitfalls that are going to be coming in his life. You be transparent. You don't be self-centered on yourself as a dad. You talk to your child. You take him places. You do things with him. You be a father like Dr. Twardowski was to his daughter. She's not going to grow up with an addiction problem. You don't just take his butt to church and drop him off. You actually tell him who God is. You help him find his identity and who he is as a child. Because most often we find our identity in our parent, right? And then when we don't like that, we grow up and we try to create this other one for ourselves. How'd that work out for us? It starts very, very young. And that's why I love going into these classrooms with these kids. And because of what's happening with this addiction and these drugs and alcohol and the methamphetamine, all this crap, with this going even younger now. Because by the time they get to be 13, 14 years old, it's over. You tell them how much they're loved, and you raise them up to show them who they are, and they have a foundation.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question up here.
Hi, my name's Anastasia. I'm a first year here.
Love that name, Anastasia.
Thank you. I love the name Vance. So I just had a question. It's no secret that players in the NFL, the MLB, a lot of them have these big addiction problems, and you hear about it maybe after the fact. Like, I'm a huge baseball fan. Like, one of my favorites, Strawberry and Doc Gooden. They had these huge addiction problems, and people enabled them through their whole careers. Now, I just want to know if you take any issue, not pointing a blame, just taking any issue of how the NFL deals with these things and kind of enables their players to be on this path rather than try and push them to another path.
You know, that's a really good question. And in my addiction, I was so pissed off at the NFL because it was all their fault. Because they didn't offer enough programs, because they didn't talk to me. They didn't do anything to try to help me out, to get clean. They just threw me away to the dogs. But as I get more and more sober, I start realizing that the NFL and the Major League Baseball and basketball, they're about sports, making money, and entertainment. And they actually do try to offer options for those who are struggling. But they're so busy trying to run their front offices and deal with other issues that they don't really have a lot of time to come and educate. And then you don't have ball players like myself who have traveled that path and that are willing to come back in here and say, listen, dude, you're going to F your life up if you keep doing what you're doing, man. And let me tell you about my life so you can see. And I know you idolize me because you go watch film of me so you can grow up and be like me. So listen to my story so you don't fall into this trap. I got a jacked up father too, right? Some guys, mom was a prostitute. But it doesn't mean you have to go take this money and let money identify who you are. So it's not really the NFL's fault. I used to think it was. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that they need to do more with the former ball players so that we can become advocates and so we can travel around the country and speak to these ball players. It took the story concussion for anything to happen with that. I'm dealing with that stuff now, man. That had me depressed over the last couple of weeks because I had my test done. I'm stupid. I was that guy. I forgot to say I was driving down the road. I told you about how many times I was driving fast, but I would drive down the road, drunk, high, Seroquel, butt naked, take all my clothes off, throw them out the car, knew I was going to get pulled over. So I didn't want the cops to arrest me and take me to a bad jail and count my clothes. So I made sure I'm naked when I got pulled over, sitting in the car, wanting to commit suicide and kill myself. Crazy. So they need to ask more ball players who have played the game to reach out and let them know that there's help out there. Because the NFL paid for me to get help too. So there is help out there for professional athletes. Dale Strawberry is a good friend of mine. We probably need to wrap this up, right?
I think, do we still have a question down in AC 100?
We have another question in Joplin.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have one, and
All right, let's go AC 100,
Hello?
then to Joplin.
Okay, hi, my name is Tasfia, and thank you for your talk. I just had one question about, one person asked about preventing this cycle, and I wanted to know about when this is already occurring. So you said you were already in the pattern of behavior, and you thought that, like, this isn't what you're like, but you were in addiction, but you didn't recognize it until something all the way at the end. Hello? As doctors, we're going to be seeing patients that maybe are in an abusive relationship or they're in addiction, but it takes them a while to recognize that something is wrong, and like the person has to recognize that they want to fix it. So how can we help them earlier before something bad happens all the way at the end, that this is when they need to change?
Vance and I were having that discussion actually earlier this morning while we were having breakfast. There is a certain truth, you know, the old AA saying that they have to hit rock bottom before they're going to be ready for help. But there's a certain amount of truth to that. You can't help somebody who doesn't want to have help. You know, I could do a lot of stuff for Vance. I could do stuff to keep him alive while I was trying to convince him he needed help. But I can't send him for help if he's not going to want to be there. Otherwise, he's not going to get better. So you have to actually kind of do this balancing act between recognizing the problem, trying to convince the person who's sitting in front of you that there's a problem, that it's really not normal to drink a fifth of vodka every day, that's not an okay thing, and suggesting that indeed it's time to start looking for help. And then you start, over a period of time, you start saying, I think AA would be a good choice for you, or I think that this rehab facility would be a good choice for you. But you can't force somebody to get help if they're not ready. They have to be ready. So your job is to do everything you can to keep them alive and keep them going while you're convincing them that they need to be ready. And I'm not subtle about this to people. I will say, you're going to die if you keep this up. This is not going to go well for you. And I will not tell them just that they're going to die, because honestly, Vance would have been more than happy with dying quickly somewhere at several times during his life. But what I'll tell them is that people who die from complications of alcohol and drug abuse die being that 50-year-old man who just pooped all over himself and is getting cleaned up by the nurse and end up being in a nursing home in the worst possible situation. Because I think that there's importance in that image. A lot of these people are, we talked about it at dinner the other night, a lot of these people are suicidal long-term. It's kind of a long-term slow suicide, and so you kind of have to deal with it as a long-term problem.
As far as that domestic violence stuff and those relationships, expose it. The other thing I would suggest, guys, don't be afraid of people. I tell my 13-year-old, 9-year-old when we drive by graveyards, that's where we all going to end up one day. So don't you ever be afraid of people. Don't be afraid to expose and talk about things that are dark. As far as the DOs, you young DOs, when you start taking over this country, just be very upfront and honest like Dr. Twardowski was to me. And I'd add, maybe set up some type of intervention where you would ask him, can we contact your wife? Which one, he wouldn't have known. So can we contact someone in your family? I'd like to talk with them in a meeting with you to talk about what I'm seeing, with what you're doing with yourself with this a problem, this addiction that you have. And then maybe staying on top of that, because we do trust our doctors. And again, as far as these relationships, you got to get out of them and expose it and separate yourself from the person that's being abused, because they value your relationship with them. Eventually, when that son of a F, whatever that person is that's being abusive, hurts them for the last time, they're going to want to come to you because they're going to know you're there. So when you're done being abused, come to me, the one who loves you.
All right, thanks very much.
Where are those Super Bowl rings at?
I
know you Kansas City fans, you got to watch you.
You know, but before we wrap up here, I just want to thank you both for being here. Dr. D'Agostino may have another comment, but on behalf of everyone, I think we all recognize how courageous it takes to be transparent and vulnerable.
Thank you, sir.
And for the work that you're doing and the both of you are sharing in this story, I thank you on behalf of all of us. Thank you.
This was great. The one thing as I was listening to this, and this is the second time I've heard this, and it's very emotional. It's a very emotional story, and I really want to thank you for being so vulnerable and opening your heart and your mind to us. This was really a wonderful experience for the students. The only last thing that I'll plant the seed for, what you heard was a story of suffering, not of pain. And in the United States, we have words for those things. In the English language, we have words that distinguish those two. In many of the cultures you're going to be working with, they don't. They link pain with suffering. And I want you to think back and understand and hear and feel the anguish you just heard while this was going on. And that emotional turmoil is what drove this relationship to get together. I really hope y'all took a lot of interest in this and pay attention to it. Come back to this story as you're going through your lectures with your first patients and those people that you see in the future, because remember the numbers. We have about 500 people watching this now. Each of you will have an average of 2,000 to 3,000 people. And if you can imagine these numbers, somewhere between 15 and 30% of your patients will be actively abusing, using, or in trouble at any moment. And depending on the population, like the population I grew up with, where I cut my teeth in medicine, over 80% of the people were addicted to something. So this exists, and this was a wonderful experience. I really want to thank you very much. And I got to get one of those rings on my finger before you leave. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here.